For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the afternoon of July 12, 2016, 26-year-old Faith Knight and her fiancé, Owen Chandler, embarked on a canoe trip in the 10,000 Islands of Florida, as a storm gathered on the horizon. Only Owen returned, his story a chilling tale of a tragic accident and a bride swept away by the raging waters. Despite an extensive search involving the Coast Guard and local authorities, Faith vanished without a trace. For 9 agonizing years, her family lived with unbearable uncertainty, clinging to hope while fearing the worst. Then, in the spring of 2025, a weathered canoe, half buried in the dense mangrove mud, resurfaced. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Faith Knight. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. The 10,000 Islands, a labyrinth of mangrove forests and winding waterways off Florida's southwest coast, are a place of breathtaking beauty. Sunlight dances on the shallow turquoise water, while pelicans glide effortlessly overhead. But on that fateful August afternoon in 2016, an ominous darkness crept across the horizon, a precursor to the storm that would forever alter the landscape of this tranquil paradise. Faith Knight, a vibrant 26-year-old teacher, and her fiancé, Owen Chandler, had chosen this picturesque location to celebrate their upcoming wedding. They were experienced kayakers, but the decision to venture out in a canoe as the storm brewed would prove tragically ill-fated. The air grew heavy with humidity, the wind picking up, rustling the mangrove leaves with an uneasy whisper. Faith, ever the optimist, laughed as she snapped photos of the gathering clouds, capturing what would be the last images of her alive. Owen later recounted how they paddled further out, enjoying the solitude and the thrill of the approaching storm. But as the first fat raindrops began to fall, the idyllic scene transformed. The wind whipped the water into a frenzy, the gentle waves becoming choppy and unpredictable. Their small canoe, no match for the growing tempest, was tossed about like a toy. Panic edged into Owen's voice as he made the frantic 911 call. He described, in between gasps for breath, how a rogue wave had capsized their canoe, how he had surfaced, disoriented and desperate, but Faith had been swept away. The crackling static on the recording underscored the urgency and terror of the moment. First responders battled treacherous conditions, the storm raging around them as they searched for any sign of Faith. Boats struggled against the relentless wind and waves. Helicopters fought for visibility in the driving rain. The Coast Guard, local police, and volunteers combed the area, their hopes dwindling with each passing hour. Owen, wrapped in a blanket, sat shivering on the shore, his clothes torn, his arms bearing superficial scratches. He recounted his desperate attempts to save Faith, his voice choked with emotion. But even in those early hours, a shadow of doubt began to creep into the narrative. The initial search yielded little. Owen's canoe was recovered, overturned and battered, but there was no sign of Faith, nor of her life jacket. The search continued for days, then weeks, but the churning waters of the 10,000 Islands refused to relinquish their grip on the young teacher. For Faith's family, the agonizing wait for news turned into a relentless nightmare. Her parents, siblings, and friends clung to the hope that she would somehow be found alive, but as time wore on, the grim reality began to set in. Their initial grief morphed into a gnawing suspicion, a growing unease about Owen's account of that fateful afternoon. The idyllic image of the loving couple, excited for their future, began to fray around the edges, revealing a more complex, and ultimately, far more sinister picture. The initial search for Faith Knight was extensive and relentless. The Coast Guard scoured the vast expanse of the 10,000 Islands, their boats cutting through the choppy waters, sonar equipment pinging in the depths. Divers braved the murky currents, searching for any trace of the missing woman. Local police and sheriff's deputies patrolled the shoreline, their eyes scanning the mangrove roots and tangled vegetation. Volunteers, many of them friends and colleagues of Faith, joined the effort, their faces etched with worry and determination. Every piece of debris, every floating object, was scrutinized, each discovery fueling a flicker of hope that quickly faded. The recovered canoe became a focal point of the investigation. It was examined meticulously, every scratch and dent documented. The torn canvas, the splintered wood, told a story of a violent encounter with the storm. But there was something else, a length of rope tied to the stern, frayed and broken. Initially, it was assumed the rope had snapped under the strain of the turbulent waters. Owen's torn clothing and the superficial scratches on his arms seemed consistent with his account of a desperate struggle in the storm. He cooperated fully with the investigators, patiently answering their questions, his demeanor a picture of grief and exhaustion. But as detectives delved deeper, cracks began to appear in his narrative. Inconsistencies emerged in his timeline, small discrepancies that raised red flags. Some witnesses, close friends of the couple, offered conflicting accounts of Faith and Owen's relationship. Whispers of tension, of arguments, began to circulate. Had their idyllic romance been a facade? The absence of Faith's body added another layer of complexity to the investigation. Without a definitive confirmation of her death, the case remained classified as a missing person, hindering the investigators' ability to pursue a criminal investigation. The lack of concrete evidence, the circumstantial nature of the clues, left the authorities with more questions than answers. The initial fervor of the search gradually subsided, the days turning into weeks, the weeks into months. The case, though still open, began to grow cold, the trail of clues obscured by the passage of time and the relentless tides of the 10,000 Islands. The initial investigation, despite its intensity and scope, failed to provide the answers that Faith's family so desperately sought. The mystery of her disappearance remained, a dark cloud hanging over the community, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictable power of nature. The case for now seemed destined to remain unsolved, a tragic footnote in the history of the 10,000 Islands. Years passed. Seasons changed, painting the 10,000 Islands in a cyclical tapestry of vibrant greens and muted browns. But for Faith Knight's family, the colors seemed drained, the world perpetually shrouded in a gray mist of grief and unanswered questions. The vibrant, hopeful young woman who had loved these islands was gone, swallowed by the very waters that had once brought her so much joy. Her absence was a constant ache, a void that could never be filled. Birthdays and holidays were marked by a poignant blend of remembrance and sorrow. The laughter and light that Faith had brought into their lives were replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated by the quiet sobs of a family struggling to cope with a loss they could not comprehend. The community, too, felt the weight of the unsolved mystery. The 10,000 Islands, once a symbol of natural beauty and tranquility, now held a darker connotation. A reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded there. The case of Faith Knight became a local legend, whispered about in hushed tones, a cautionary tale of the unpredictable power of nature and the fragility of human life. The initial flurry of media attention faded, but the questions lingered. What had truly happened to Faith Knight? Had she simply been a victim of a tragic accident, or was there something more sinister at play? Logan Pierce, a forensic analyst with a reputation for meticulous attention to detail, periodically reviewed cold cases, searching for overlooked clues, for those subtle inconsistencies that could unlock the truth. He had followed the Knight case from the beginning, intrigued by the ambiguous nature of the evidence. Deputy Joel Rowe, a seasoned investigator with a deep understanding of the local community, shared Pierce's commitment to finding answers. He had known Faith's family for years, and the unresolved nature of her disappearance gnawed at him. He felt a personal responsibility to bring closure to the grieving family and to the community. The two men, driven by a shared sense of purpose, would pore over the case files, retracing the steps of the initial investigation, searching for that elusive piece of the puzzle that could finally unlock the mystery. They interviewed witnesses again, scrutinized the original reports, and examined the limited physical evidence. But the trail remained cold, the answers elusive. The frustration mounted, the weight of the unsolved case a constant burden. Faith's family, despite the passage of time, refused to give up hope. They continued to appeal for information, their pleas echoing in the local newspapers and on social media. They organized searches, distributed flyers, and kept Faith's memory alive, determined that she would not be forgotten. But as the years wore on, a sense of resignation began to creep in. The possibility that they might never know the truth, that the mystery of Faith's disappearance would forever remain unsolved, became a heavy weight to bear. The 10,000 Islands, once a place of cherished memories, now held a painful secret, a silent testament to a life tragically cut short and a mystery that continued to haunt the community. 9 years after Faith Knight vanished, a seemingly unrelated event would breathe new life into the stagnant investigation. A group of environmental researchers, conducting a survey of mangrove health in a remote section of the 10,000 Islands, stumbled upon a partially submerged object wedged deep within the tangled roots. As they cleared away the clinging vegetation, the unmistakable outline of a canoe emerged, its once vibrant blue hull now faded and scarred, encrusted with barnacles and marine growth. The discovery sent ripples of excitement and apprehension through the small community. Could this be the missing canoe, the vessel that held the key to unlocking the mystery of Faith Knight's disappearance? The canoe was carefully extracted from its muddy tomb, its fragile frame handled with the utmost care. It was transported to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's crime lab, where a team of forensic experts began a painstaking examination. The years spent submerged in the saltwater had taken their toll, but beneath the layers of grime and decay, crucial details began to emerge. The canoe's identification number, barely legible beneath the incrustations, confirmed it was indeed the vessel Owen Chandler had been piloting on that fateful day. The discovery, while significant, was just the beginning. As the forensic team continued their examination, their attention was drawn to a section of rope tied to the stern. Unlike the rest of the rope, which was frayed and weathered, this section appeared cleanly cut, almost as if it had been severed with a sharp instrument. This seemingly minor detail would prove to be a critical turning point in the investigation. The initial assumption had been that the rope had broken under the strain of the storm. However, the clean cut raised the possibility of deliberate action, of human intervention. Logan Pierce, the forensic analyst who had followed the Knight case for years, examined the rope under a high-powered microscope. The magnified view revealed a series of fine, parallel striations on the cut surface, marks that were inconsistent with a natural break or a simple knife cut. Pierce's analysis concluded that the rope had been severed with a saw, a detail that dramatically shifted the focus of the investigation. The accidental discovery of the canoe, coupled with Pierce's forensic analysis, transformed the cold case into a hot lead. The focus, once again, turned to Owen Chandler. The man who had claimed to be a grieving fiancé, a victim of circumstance, now found himself at the center of a renewed investigation, the long-dormant questions surrounding Faith's disappearance resurfacing with a chilling intensity. The discovery of the canoe, coupled with Logan Pierce's analysis of the severed rope, breathed new life into the investigation of Faith Knight's disappearance. The focus shifted squarely onto Owen Chandler, the man who had painted himself as a heartbroken fiancé, a victim of a tragic accident. 9 years had passed, but the passage of time had done little to diminish the questions that lingered around his account of that fateful day. Detective Joel Rowe, now leading the reinvigorated investigation, began by meticulously reconstructing Owen's movements in the days and weeks following Faith's disappearance. He reviewed the initial interviews, searching for inconsistencies, for subtle shifts in Owen's demeanor and narrative. He re-interviewed witnesses, probing their memories, looking for any detail, however small, that might shed new light on the events of that stormy August afternoon. Rowe's attention was drawn to Owen's financial records. A routine inquiry with the insurance company revealed a significant increase in Faith's life insurance policy just weeks before her disappearance. Owen, as the sole beneficiary, stood to gain a substantial sum of money from her death. This discovery, while circumstantial, added another layer of suspicion to the already mounting evidence against him. The financial motive, coupled with the forensic evidence from the canoe, began to paint a disturbing picture. Rowe's investigation then led him to Brooke Alvarez, a neighbor who lived across the street from Owen and Faith. Alvarez, initially hesitant to speak, eventually revealed a crucial piece of information. In the weeks following Faith's disappearance, she had overheard Owen talking on his phone, his voice laced with a strange mix of relief and excitement. He had used the word free, a term that resonated with Alvarez, given the circumstances. The seemingly innocuous word, uttered in a moment of unguarded emotion, became a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence, hinting at a possible motive for Faith's disappearance. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. The cleanly severed rope, the increased life insurance policy, and the overheard conversation all pointed towards a deliberate act, a carefully orchestrated plan to make Faith's death appear accidental. The image of Owen Chandler as the grieving fiancé began to crumble, replaced by the chilling possibility that he had been responsible for her demise. The circumstantial evidence, while compelling, was not enough to secure a conviction. Roe needed a confession, a direct admission of guilt from Owen Chandler. The renewed investigation, fueled by forensic science and dogged detective work, had brought them to this point. The net was closing in, the weight of the evidence mounting against Owen Chandler. The next step was to confront him with the truth, to see if he would finally break his silence and reveal the dark secret he had harbored for 9 long years. The interrogation room was stark and sterile, the air thick with anticipation. Owen Chandler sat across from Detective Roe, his face pale, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. 9 years had passed since Faith Knight's disappearance. 9 years he had lived under a cloud of suspicion, maintaining his innocence, clinging to the story of a tragic accident. But now, the walls were closing in. Roe began by laying out the facts, presenting the evidence piece by piece, like a prosecutor building a case. He started with the discovery of the canoe, the seemingly insignificant detail of the cleanly cut rope. He explained Logan Pierce's analysis, how the microscopic examination revealed the telltale saw marks, evidence that contradicted Owen's original account. Owen listened impassively, his eyes fixed on the table, his expression unreadable. Roe then introduced the financial evidence, the substantial increase in Faith's life insurance policy just weeks before her disappearance. He pointed out the obvious motive, the significant financial gain Owen stood to receive from her death. A flicker of unease crossed Owen's face, but he remained silent. Roe continued, his voice calm and measured, recounting Brooke Alvarez's testimony, her recollection of the overheard conversation, the single word "free" that hung heavy in the air. Owen shifted in his chair, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. The weight of the evidence, the accumulation of circumstantial details, was beginning to take its toll. He fidgeted nervously, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Roe leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. He recounted the initial search, the lack of Faith's body, the unanswered questions that had haunted the community for 9 long years. He spoke of the pain and anguish of Faith's family, their relentless pursuit of the truth. He described the meticulous forensic work, the painstaking investigation that had led them to this moment, to this room, to Owen Chandler. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Owen's facade began to crack. The carefully constructed mask of grief and innocence slipped, revealing the fear and desperation beneath. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting Roe's. The defiance that had characterized his previous statements was gone, replaced by a flicker of resignation. The interrogation continued for hours, the tension in the room palpable. Roe pressed on, relentlessly, patiently, chipping away at Owen's defenses. He presented the evidence again and again, forcing Owen to confront the truth, the undeniable reality of his actions. Finally, the dam broke. Owen's carefully constructed narrative crumbled under the weight of the evidence. He confessed. The words tumbled out, a torrent of guilt and remorse, a desperate attempt to unburden himself of the secret he had carried for so long. He described how he had planned it all, how he had tied Faith's life jacket to the canoe, ensuring she would be dragged down by the weight. He recounted the moment he severed the rope with a saw he had brought along, disguised as a fishing tool. He confessed to his failed attempt to sink the canoe, his panicked flight back to shore, his carefully crafted story of a tragic accident. The confession was detailed and chilling, a stark contrast to the image of the grieving fiancé he had so meticulously cultivated. The truth, buried for 9 long years, had finally been unearthed. The breakthrough had come, not through a dramatic revelation or a sudden twist, but through the painstaking accumulation of evidence, the relentless pursuit of the truth, and the unwavering determination of those who refused to let Faith Knight's memory fade. The courtroom was hushed, the air thick with anticipation. Owen Chandler, his face drawn and pale, sat at the defendant's table, his gaze fixed on the floor. He had confessed to the premeditated murder of Faith Knight, his carefully constructed facade of innocence shattered by the weight of forensic evidence, financial investigation, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The trial was a somber affair, a stark contrast to the vibrant life that had been so cruelly cut short. Witnesses recounted their memories of faith, painting a picture of a kind, compassionate woman who had touched the lives of so many. Experts testified to the significance of the saw marks on the rope, the damning evidence that exposed Owen's carefully orchestrated plan. The financial investigation revealed the stark motive, the substantial life insurance policy that had transformed Owen from a grieving fiancé into a cold-blooded killer. Brooke Alvarez's testimony, though circumstantial, provided a chilling glimpse into Owen's state of mind in the weeks following Faith's disappearance. The single word, "free," echoing in the courtroom, a stark reminder of the callous disregard for human life. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the storm could have caused the rope to break, that Owen's actions were those of a panicked man trying to save his fiancée. But the prosecution's case was airtight, the evidence too compelling to ignore. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. A collective gasp filled the courtroom as the verdict was read. For Faith's family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, a measure of justice for the daughter, sister, and friend they had lost. Tears streamed down their faces, a mixture of grief and relief, the culmination of 9 long years of waiting, of searching, of hoping against hope. The impact of the verdict extended beyond the courtroom. The community, long haunted by the unsolved mystery, could finally begin to heal. The 10,000 Islands, once a symbol of tragedy and unanswered questions, could once again be appreciated for their natural beauty. Legal experts weighed in on the case, highlighting the crucial role of forensic science in solving cold cases. The meticulous examination of the canoe, the seemingly insignificant detail of the saw marks on the rope, had proved to be the linchpin of the investigation, the key that unlocked the truth. The case served as a stark reminder of the deceptive nature of staged accidents, the lengths to which some individuals will go to conceal their crimes. It underscored the importance of thorough investigation, the unwavering pursuit of justice, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. In the aftermath of the trial, a memorial service was held for Faith Knight, a celebration of her life, her spirit, and the indelible mark she had left on the community. Her memory would live on, not as a victim, but as a testament to the enduring power of love, hope, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. The case of Faith Knight, though tragic, offered a message of hope for families of other missing persons. It demonstrated that even in the darkest of circumstances, justice can prevail, that even after years of waiting, the truth can be revealed. The resolution, while bittersweet, brought closure to a community and a family, and served as a powerful reminder that even in the most remote corners of the world, justice will ultimately find its way.